Let it go. Let it be. Let it roll.
Yeah, everyone. Thank you very much for joining us this evening for the Indigenous Ways Wisdom Circle. We are extremely honored to have this space and be in this circle, as we call it, even though it's a square screen we're looking at. We'd like to take this time to acknowledge the traditional owners and ancestors and caretakers of these tribal lands of Ogapoge Owingeh, also known as Santa Fe. We're all happy to live here, and we thank the Pueblos for welcoming us and having feast days to show us how beautiful and resilient their cultures continue to be. Seasons, ceremonies, respect and honor. Thank you. This evening, we have a very, 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 and I don't like using adverbs, but our special guest, Mateo Romero, is Pueblo. He's from Cochiti, and he's alumni from the Institute of American Indian Arts. And he went on to study in other universities, Ivy League. He went to Albuquerque UNM. He's got his MFA, master's in the arts, fine arts. So there's a lot of accolades to say about Mateo, but instead of doing that tonight, we're just going to go right to Mateo. And hey, Mateo, thank you for being with us, brother. It's been a long time.
Thanks. Hua. Thank you for having me.
Yes.
Thank you for putting this together. I'm glad to be with you guys tonight.
Thank you very much. And yeah, please introduce yourself. Let us know some of the basics of who you are before we start the questions.
My name is Mateo Romero. My Carrizan name is Hetze, which is shield in Carries, and I'm Cochiti Pueblo. I live in Powaki Pueblo with my wife, Melissa Talachi, and my children, Rain Romero, Povey Romero, and River Romero, and Eric Fisher, who is my wife's son from her first marriage, who I raised. I'm a painter. I have a BA from Dartmouth. I have an MFA from UNM in printmaking. I attended the Institute. I taught at the Institute, IAIA, and I'm currently just making paintings. I'm a painter. I have different types of paintings I do and different iterations in the past, and I'm happy to be here and talk about my work and the different types of work I did and answer any questions anybody has.
Thank you. That's great. So you earned your MFA from UNM and your undergraduate from Dartmouth, and started your studies at IA. I'm sure you started art way before that as well, because it looks like you come from a family of artists, and you're also known for printmaking and painting. So how does your education and your lived experiences intersect with your creative process?
You touched on something interesting. I grew up in a family of artists. My father was a Dunn School painter, Santiago Holly Romero. His mother was a Cochiti polychrome revivalist, a pottery maker in the village in the early 60s and 70s, when there were not a lot of people doing the pottery type at the time. And she's referred to as a revivalist. She did traditional Cochiti polychrome, like the three colors. My brother is Diego Romero. He's a ceramicist, a noted potter. So my whole life was basically influenced by being born into an art family, which I didn't really realize initially. I didn't really understand that when I was a kid, but I was raised as I guess an art prodigy. I guess I was raised by artists to make art, which was not a conscious thing. I didn't understand it. I just was in that environment. So which was pretty amazing. Some of my earliest memories are my father and his painting, and my brother and his drawing abilities. It just sort of happened like that, I guess. I can't hear the sound, but
That's a blessing. So, if you don't mind, can you walk us through the chronology of your artistic evolution from your early narrative paintings reflecting social commentary and contemporary Pueblo life to your series of exploring themes such as addiction, Indian gaming, Bonnie and Clyde, and Voices at Wounded Knee? And how did your style develop into the larger historical collective works we see today, including your unique technique of incorporating asphalt into the surface?
absolutely. So the one thing that carries through all my work is that I'm a figure ground painter. So I have like people and space or landscapes. I'm not an abstract painter per se. I do figure ground work. So that's kind of how I would position the work overall, if there was an overarching theme to it, figurative. The earlier stuff, I called it social landscape painting. It was early work I did. Social realism was another term I used to talk about it. They were heavier pieces earlier on. They dealt with themes like self-addiction. They dealt with alcoholism. They dealt with drug use, sexual assault, domestic violence, fetal alcohol syndrome. There was real tension in the work. There was real violence in the work, just slightly coded. The paintings were done, I think, in a pretty beautiful way with the color and the treatment and the brushwork. So formally, they're very well built, I think, but they really had dark themes to them, which were based in my life. I mean, they were based on things I was seeing. In a sense, they were kind of autobiographical. The earliest works I remember having any success with were just portraits of people that I knew from the Institute when I was a student. And it was just portraits of people I knew. There are people in bars, there are people drinking, there are people in cars, there were people in couples, oftentimes lovers, in the middle of something, an argument, a kiss. There might be things like guns lying around. There might be things like hypodermic needles or empty bottles of alcohol in the background. And a lot of it had to do with my own drinking. I've been sober for about 26 years now, so the work I do now is very different. But that earlier work was pretty dark. It was pretty. There were critiques. There were critiques about people, myself, people I knew. They were based on my experiences in Indian country, and they were about these darker themes. There were some moments actually pretty beautiful in them too. There were dancer paintings in there. There were portraits of children and kids on the kiva and things like that too. It wasn't all it wasn't all dark, but a lot of it dealt with what I'd called social realism, and a lot of the things that I was experiencing while I was an alcoholic were pretty they were pretty tense. The things were tense. There was a tension in the work. Later work, I started doing a second series of work when I sobered up, coincidentally. It was the summer that I stopped drinking. I was a SAR fellow, and that summer I started doing photographic transfers. So I started incorporating my own photography and some of the photography of other artists, old Curtis photographs and things like that. I started transferring those onto canvases and large panels and painting on those. And that was a second set of work, which didn't really deal with the social realism element anymore. It was much more about painting dancers, and it was about my sobriety, which I didn't realize at the time. It just happened. I got sober and started doing this work at the same time, which I don't think was a coincidence, but I don't think I understood it at the time either. And the pieces became much brighter. They became about real radiant light and color. There was a lightness about it. The dancers were gorgeous. Oftentimes, they were based on my own photography. Probably about 90% of those paintings were my own photographs. So I went to different villages and obtained permits to photograph dancers in the pueblos. I went to places like 8 Northern Arts and Crafts Show, which I don't even know if that's even around, but at the time it was back then. And I went to the Herd Museum. I would photograph there during their Indian market, the dancers, and I would make paintings out of that, using it as a source and transferring it. And those things were actually full of life and motion and energy, and they don't touch on the earlier, what I refer to as the social landscape, the social realism. They don't talk about the darkness, but also I don't think I was experiencing as much darkness in my life either. After I stopped drinking myself, I think my life became lighter. I was able to see more color around me, more brightness in people. When you do a portrait of a beautiful little kid, they have all the feathers coming out and they have all the paint on their face and the lights coming in from behind them. Those things are just so like radiant that there's not really a place for something like a bullet casing or like a beer bottle to show up in that picture plane, because they're not really about that. They're about something different. They're about some kind of anima. They're about mana. They're about a celebration of life and the spiritual connection that emanates through the dance, that emanates through all native cultures. All indigenous cultures, I think, have that practice of celebrating life and spirituality. And those paintings they were different paintings for a different time in my life. And then the last set of works I do, which I've only been doing for about 6 years, have been landscape paintings. So I started a series of landscape paintings. They're palette knife paintings. They are very heavy application of oil paint. They're very thick. You can feel on the surface maybe a 1/2 inch of paint running over the canvas, a 1/4 inch of paint. They're almost low relief sculpture kind of. And those are different sites. I call them places of power. And they are in the Pueblo world exclusively. I don't paint like landscapes from Portland, Oregon or something. I almost exclusively paint, I do exclusively paint places within the Pueblo world. And I use existing native language, because all these places have names. They have pre-existing names in the history, right? So, you touched on Santa Fe's Ogopoge Owenge. That's White Shell Water Place in Tewa. And the village my wife comes from is Poswage Owenge. They call it Powake. The conquistadors call it Powake because they can't pronounce any of the indigenous names. But the actual, the name is Poswage, which is the water drinking place. And it was a mother village in the Tewa world, pre-contact. I do a lot of the Pedronal, that O'Keeffe composition out there by Ghost Ranch. And Pedronal is, it's Seeping Owenge. It's Flint Mountain. And there's a ruin on the edge of it. The left shelf off of that main composition, there's that tabletop mesa. Just to the left, there's a ruin on there, an Anasazi ruin. That's Seeping Owenge. So I use all the existing native names. Mostly I'm painting northern New Mexico, so mostly it's Tewa. And it's a project to reclaim the space. It's a project to reclaim the sacred. These are existing names in our people's language. These are existing places in our community, in our religion, in our songs, in our ceremonies. And I refer them as places of power. There's an etymology, the history of the names would exist. So through bringing these names forward, it's an act of trying to reclaim them from a sort of, colonized narrative, they've all been changed. Cochiti initially is Cochit, and they can't say that either, so they call it Cochiti, right? The conquerors, the conquistadors. Tsuke is Tetsuge Wenge. All the villages, pretty much, Kuyamunge originally is called Kuyamuge in Tewa. So all these spaces around us have been existing, for thousands of years, and the songs and the language of the indigenous people here. And we're all here together, and I don't mean it to be exclusive. I mean it to include people in the process. I don't mean to exclude people by using indigenous language. I mean to include people in the etymology and the history of the space, so that they understand that Powaki is Poswage, and that Tsuke is Tetsuge, and that all these places have existed for thousands of years in our memories, and that's part of the project of the reclamation of the space. I'm not just making landscape paintings in the Pueblo world. I'm talking about the ideology of the Pueblo people, the values of the Pueblo people, the connections we have to the land, the connections of the original language and names and the meanings of it.
Well, it sounds like with your evolution of development, the creative process, the growth, your earlier style of painting, telling a story, incorporating things like, addiction, and I read something about Bonnie and Clyde, and in creating that stuff that kind of mirrored some of your own activities in life and lifestyle, was there a feeling of release or healing to be able to put a concept out, a narrative and a story in such an aesthetic way, working with the power of paints, the power of creation? Was there some kind of relief in that? Because obviously there was some darkness, as you mentioned, which I can also maybe say tortured soul syndrome, which a lot of us have experienced as all kinds of people, not just Indigenous, but was there any of that? Was there some healing in creating that stuff?
There was a violence in the earlier work, and there was a darkness in my own life through my experiences and dealing with trauma and post-traumatic stress and drinking and coming out of a family where there was alcoholism. I think I did those paintings as a way to just survive. There's a quote from oh gosh, I'm trying to remember the painter. He's Philip Guston has a quote where he says, we just keep painting to survive, to live. We paint to live, right? It's Philip Guston. And I think for me at the time, I was just trying to survive. I don't think I knew something else. That's what I knew at that time. That was pretty authentic to who I was at that time. And that's what kind of came out in the work. But I don't think it was cathartic to me. The act of painting is cathartic. I have a tremendous connection to the joy of just painting and using materials and being in the studio and working. But those subject matters were so dark and kind of violent that I don't think that there was a release in that. I think the release came through being sober. To be honest, I think, sobriety changed my life. I probably wouldn't be here. I wouldn't be alive, I don't think. I would have been like a TC Cannon. I would have been dead in a car crash somewhere in the Arroyo, probably. I've been sober about 26 years, so I don't think I would have lasted that long. Yeah, I'm pretty sure I wouldn't have. But, his story is interesting too, right? I mean, he's this meteoric young painter coming out of the Institute, and he dies. He's not that old. I mean, he's maybe like 26 or something, and he only has a handful of really interesting, mature painting. But I think I at 26, I'm not comparing myself to TC Cannon exactly. He's an amazing painter, but I would say that I hadn't really gone far enough in my own body of work to be remembered. No one would probably know about me if I died at 26, right? So I credit the sobriety with the change in my life, and I also credit it with the change in my painting style, what I was painting, the subject matter, the content. The discourse becomes different. As my life becomes less violent and less dark, through my relationship with the Pueblo people, and my wife and my children, and my studio art practice, my sobriety, I think those are really the moments that become healing, right? That's the connection, is to living in life as opposed to an earlier iteration where I was maybe not even conscious that I was engaged in some kind of death culture through drinking and using drugs and things like that. I don't think I was even conscious of that. I think I just grew up in American society and I was surrounded by this. And I don't think I really thought about it until I was maybe, halfway through my life almost, and kind of realized that it was killing me and that there were ways to do it that were different. And I think in my life, I came to a place where it became so dark and I was so desperate that you become willing to try something else, And for me, that was sobriety.
That's awesome. I remember back in the day meeting Earl Biss and so some of those other guys. The name's slipping me. It's the end of the day and I'm tired. But I've met some pretty amazing artists that are now legends. And some died younger and some died older. But there's always this theme of, wow, what a genius. And their art lives on. Their art lives on. And some of the works I saw in the 1960s and some of the themes and the stories that were told back then. And it's pretty amazing. So
people will let you kill yourself as an artist. That American culture will give you enough time and enough space and enough resource. They will literally let you kill yourself. And that's all very American, to be an American painter. People will encourage it. I mean, they encourage artists to act, precocious and to drink. And there's myths associated with art. If you look at Jackson Pollock, he's this real example of this sort of enfant terrible, right? Like this artist who's incredibly talented, but also just wild and capricious. And that's encouraged. I mean, I think in some ways people, collectors and curators and people who write about art and maybe even American culture, they find that titillating, or they're interesting, or they think that artists are people who feel things more intensely than other people. And they feel that they have to use drugs and alcohol, or maybe be promiscuous, or live some kind of licentious life, because they're feeling all this inner pain and all this angst. And they will let you kill yourself. They will encourage you to drive your car into the arroyo and die. They won't necessarily kill you, but they won't stop that either. I mean, I can tell you all these funny stories about Earl Biss and Fritz Scholder and all these guys, some of them I knew. And I can also tell you that collectors encouraged those behaviors. Collectors thought it was cute, or it was kind of funny, or, they thought these artists were clever, that this was like part of this. If you invited these people in your life, that they were tricksters, and you had to be open to this idea that they would break into your wine cellar and take all your expensive wine and drive off in the night in one of your cars or something. So people will let you do that. I don't advocate it. I mean, I think it's a kind of a romantic idea that artists are more connected to something than non-artists. I don't believe that. I think these are elements of human condition and human psyche. I don't believe that artists feel things more than other people. I don't believe that art is even the exclusive domain of artists. I think all human people have the capacity to do this work. And I think at one point, all Native people were probably doing it. They're all engaged in dancing and ceremony and, making pottery and building spaces in the Pueblo. And we've come to a place now where we have sort of internalized these Western European canons about education and about division of labor between men and women. And, we're in some ways, we're pretty colonized, right? And with that comes this idea that now there's specialization in art, which I don't think we initially probably even had that idea, right? I don't think there was a native idea for specialization in art or division in labor when it comes to something like art manufacture. But that's kind of where we wind up now. That's probably why I look at things like the indigenous names of landscape places, and I bring the etymology and the language back out, because I think that as far as we've come to being colonized, that we still hold on to our essence as Native peoples. We are still essentially Native and Indigenous, and things like language and art are some of our connections back to ceremony and spirituality. And I would say sobriety. I'd say that's part of it too.
Yeah, it makes me think about when I'm walking through.
Sounds like an AA meeting, right? Sounds like we're
Yeah,
doing like an AA meeting.
yeah, right. Like going into a casino or something like that and seeing a big Mateo Romero, just like, wow, just studying that, going, dude, you've really mastered your craft here. Starting from your beginnings at IA to coming to where you're at now, where you really have technique down and different styles and genres, and you can pass it down. And you say you've even had a stint at teaching at IAIA.
I
I
did teach
mean, that's
to you.
yeah, that's really giving back to the community there, because at one time you
I
were one of
tried.
them guys.
I think the bureaucratic culture at the institute may have resisted the effort, but I did try to give back in that way.
Yeah, I've
Well, I mean, I do have skill sets, and I have been doing this almost my entire life. So I think if you don't die in the arroyo at 26, you wind up developing skill sets. And I was not the most talented kid growing up in my community. I could tell you that. I think my brother was always a better drawer than me, better draftsman. There were kids in my community that grew up in Berkeley that were better writers. There were better, people that I thought were more aesthetically inclined than me. So I think I just stayed around longer. If you hang out long enough, they make you a teacher at an art school. I always say that, right? If you hang out long enough, you become the professor.
Yeah, exactly. So you've talked about some of your influences, and as the art world continues to evolve, how have you been able to navigate the transition from creating and exhibiting original works in live form, if you will, as opposed to the demand now for digital literacy and an online presence? Do you see the pros and cons of that, or have you been able
I
to
think
engage?
everything's moving into a digital realm. There's no question about that. I don't do any of that. So I'm very analog. I'm very much a person who uses a brush and a piece of charcoal to make my work, some color. The techniques I use are Renaissance, right? They're Western European Renaissance techniques with canvas and oil paint and brushes and charcoal. So I'm almost totally devoid of this whole thing. I understand that it's very digital, and that if you said something to me like, Mateo, the next big thing is going to be artificial intelligence, and you should get on this, and blah blah blah. I would not dispute those things. I'm not naive or unaware. But if you ask me what my interest in is, I personally don't do any of that stuff. I make a painting and take a photograph of it on my phone, and that's almost entirely where it ends. I don't really understand the digital world, or I don't do websites, or I barely have social media. I just have this like tiny little thread of social media. But I also understand that as an artist, there's tremendous potential. That when I grew up, when I was initially doing this, the relationship was almost exclusively between artists and dealers. This is like 1989. This was like 30, 40 years ago. You had to come out of an art program, or not even necessarily come out of an art program. A lot of people did. A lot of people studied in fine art programs, and you developed a relationship with dealers, and you had your work exhibited, and there was a process of sort of becoming professional and coming up. Nowadays, people don't need to do that. I mean, nowadays you can open up your own website, you can push your information through social media. There's actually, embedded in social media platforms. If you build good, Facebook and Instagram and TikTok and all that stuff, you actually have, collectors embedded into your mailing list, right? So there's tremendous potential there as a marketing tool to reach people and to be a successful commercial artist. But I don't understand any of it, and I don't pretend to, and I don't have any other than just some kind of, overall look at it as it interacts with art. I'm interested in art and culture, so I comment on it, but I don't understand how to do any of that stuff. I don't really know it. I'm just in my studio listening to vinyl records and painting. I've kind of gone the other direction, really. I've kind of consciously gone to like older things, older materials, older cameras, older cars, things like that.
That is so cool. You're staying original to who you are and not forcing yourself to turn into
less
all
cool.
that. Which,
Yeah, I'm just seeing my
yeah,
limitations. I just don't understand the new stuff. That's just me being very honest. I think it's less cool and just, where are you comfortable, right? This is where I'm
right.
comfortable. And
And
that's just who I am. Yeah, it would be very disingenuous of me to tell you that I understood the digital world, or if I understood, I have ideas about where it's going, but I don't understand it exactly.
right. And I don't think a lot of people in it really do either, or
No
where
one
it's
does,
going.
apparently with
For
AI.
sure.
It's the question that no one asked. It's being answered with huge rapacity, and everyone's putting resource into it. But I don't think it's going to help artists. I don't think it's going to help. It's not going to help any creative person, I don't think, and maybe disenfranchise large amounts of workers before we're done. So it's terrifying, but it's not necessarily something to understand or even helpful.
Yeah.
It's basically training itself on artists, right? I mean, it's training itself to make
Yeah.
that art using all the existing samples of paintings and pottery and written information and all these things, right? So, the question, will it ever make good art? I mean, that's one question. But the second question is, it seems like it's some giant attempt to avoid like a copyright issue, right? Some neoliberal kind of wet dream where it creates art without compensating creators, right? It's got this idea that it's generating original work, but it's all based on existing work, and the authors and haven't been compensated for it, right?
Well, I think you and some of the artists of your generation, and Karita Coffee, and artists have kids and grandkids, and them that are in this world that kind of were born into it, really, that have certainly more to say and more to navigate with and work with in terms of their careers, and helping their parents and grandparents, get into IAI, not IA, sorry, into Indian market, into SWIA. There's that whole change and movement of like, let's help the elders, let's get their stuff online and get them in and all of that. So, as a seasoned artist, what advice would you offer to emerging artists about creativity, production, and marketing? And when inspiration fades, how do you keep going?
Well, I'd say, this digital stuff we're talking about, it's not my cup of tea and I don't understand it, but I would encourage younger artists to be aware of it and to know how to use it. I mean, my kids know how to do this. My daughter's assisting me on the Zoom right now to set all this stuff up because I don't know how to do it, right? So, but I think it's important for younger Native artists to know it. I mean, they should know how to use social media as a platform to send out their art signal and the frequency and amplify it. Understand things like how people will use AI to make art going forward. There are artists now who are using AI based on their own work. David Solly has artists creating AI programs for him, and he feeds samples of his own artwork as a painter into the AI system, and AI generates David Solly paintings, based on his own samples, right? So I would say, I don't understand this stuff, and it doesn't really interest me, but I think going forward, if I was teaching, I would recommend my students to definitely understand it and keep their finger on the pulse of what's happening with social media and AI and all this stuff. I would I would tell people that, and also, I think inspiration doesn't have to fade. As an artist, you ask the question, how do you keep producing work when inspiration fades? I don't know that inspiration has to fade, right? I mean, if you're in touch with your process, if you're in touch with yourself, you might be able to continue to be inspired or find new ways of expressing it. Maybe this AI, digital stuff we're talking about is how you express your work in the future. Maybe it changes into that. Maybe
Well,
it's
I was thinking more like one day you're like, damn, I slept good. I feel good. I did some yoga this morning. Man, my fire's burning and I'm ready. I got this vision I had in a dream and here it goes. And here's the canvas and I'm ready to go. And then the next day, like, damn, I started, but I can't get my head into it. And then the next day, oh man, am I in a block or what? Does that ever happen to you? And if it does happen to you, do you just keep going? Because obviously this is how you
sure.
support your family, right?
Sure it does. It does. Yeah. Well, there's the economics of it. I'm not. I don't know how to do anything else at this point. So I've been relatively successful with painting, but I don't. I'll never teach again. For instance, it's not in my. It's not in the stars, right? So that's what I do. What happens when people have low energy and they have waning interest in making art? I mean, you could take a break. Robert Rauschenberg talked about changing the medium. He said that anytime he hit some kind of writer's block as an artist, he changed the medium he was working in. He started using different medium or media to do different types of work. I think also most artists I know, not all, but a lot of them are driven to this. So that's a real basic
Right.
question, like an
Right.
art school undergrad question where they go in, there's a big lecture hall and the instructor says, how many of you see yourselves as being professional artists in 10 years from now or 8 years from now? And
Right.
people will raise their hands and some people don't. But it really goes to this idea of people that are driven to make
Right.
the work, right? So if you
Right.
really are driven to
Yes.
making that, yeah, you're going to come back to it. I mean, you can have bad weeks and bad years even, but you'll come back to this process because it's
Go
sort of
become a car mechanic or an electrician and say, oh no, man, I got to come back to the art, right? Yeah.
well, it's something inside of you, right? There's a real arrogance that artists I think have when they think that there's something that they have in them, a message or some kind of thing that they can really only show with their art or show best with their art. There's a real, core of self belief and maybe narcissism even, where people believe that artists can believe that they really have something important to tell people. And if you really believe that, I mean, if you really think, I was talking with Norman Akers one time, and we taught together. We were colleagues at the Institute. We both taught painting. He's a great painter, and he said that the only thing he did, which he thought only he could do, was the painting part of it. We're both instructors and talking about, maybe
You got to
film.
sell it. You got to
Well,
sell it.
well,
That's another
well,
thing.
I think maybe I felt a little stuck at that point in my career. Like I was kind of stuck as a teacher, and I wanted to be more in the studio and more vibrant as a painter. And he said the
Right.
only thing I do is uniquely me is making painting, and
Right.
someone else could teach the stuff, and they don't have to have you around here to teach the stuff. Someone else can do that. So I
Right.
think it's this idea that what you have is real central to you. It's your
Mhm.
voice, core. It's the most important thing to you, probably. I mean, maybe your children and maybe your connection with your own tribe or some kind of native community, but it's one of the most important things, right? And if that's really
Yeah.
who you are and you're driven to that, you'll come back to it. I mean, even if you're exhausted or even if you're, going
Right.
to,
Well,
you'll
thanks
eventually.
for that. We got a couple of your fans here, supporters here. Sierra Cruz, who says, I totally agree. I think everyone can do art and everyone can, because it's human to be an artist. If you're human, you are an artist. And then Emily T says, how did you research the original etymology of the indigenous names of the spots of power. And then there's another question. This is from Marla Allison, who says, as a big fan of Mateo, I'm curious about what is coming up for Mr. Romero, new shows, inspirations, or a new paint style. Alex Pena is saying, I see the process behind both your printmaking and painting, even in how you talk about your concepts. I like your insights into analog. Printmaking is one of those aged, almost antiquated media. What's your thoughts of printmaking in your Ovray? I'm sure I'm not saying that correctly. And then Montana Miller says, I like that you embrace and adapt to AI. And let's see, I've got something from David Gomez here. Hey, David, kill the artist and their work goes up in value. So I just put all of those out there only because we got to give a break in a minute here for Elena to do a commercial break. So see if you can answer all those.
It's true that when you're at a certain level of commercial success and you dye your art overnight, it doubles in value. Yeah, I've seen it with artists in Santa Fe, and over time it will actually quadruple. So I've seen that with Louisa McElwain and Dirk de Brucker and just people I knew that, you know, they have one day there's a painting you have in your collection or you're looking at, and the next day they pass on and it's like doubled in price. Quite literally that happens. Gee, there's a lot of questions in there.
Yeah, let's go with the etymology. How do you research the original etymology of the indigenous names?
Yeah, I talked to my relatives.
Okay.
I just have conversations with the older Tewas. In particular, I talked with John Garcia from Santa Clara, Capoawingue. That's their original name of their village. That's the Village of the Wild Roses. And I talked to the elders and I have conversations with them and I asked them, you know, how do you say this name? In particular, it started around Ghost Ranch. You know, I was doing Ghost Ranch paintings because that landscape is so remarkable. And I started asking him, you know, what are the original names of these places? And he started telling me, and there were really amazing conversations. And you learn from these guys. That, you know, John Garcia is actually a cultural living treasure, and that's basically how that happened. I also, you know, I don't speak Tewa, so I just have a very basic understanding of Tewa. So I use these names in the Tewa world. Largely, what I'm painting is northern New Mexico, the high desert, and
beautiful.
That's how that works. You like, I understand I don't know a lot about these names, so I go to the people who do and talk to them.
Good on you. And then what about your fan Maria Allison? What's new? New shows, inspirations, or new paint style?
Oh,
that's got a couple of minutes.
Allison, yeah, she was actually a student of mine when I was teaching.
Oh, right on.
So I always acknowledge that she's a wonderful painter herself. I'm just making landscapes. I'm doing the landscape stuff. I have shows, I have venues and things like that. There's not really a specific thing I'm working on right now, but just keeping my brush and the paint, so to speak, trying to keep loose, fluid.
And then what about Alex Pena asking about the thoughts about printmaking?
I do make prints. Yeah, I have a press. I have a tackage in my studio, and I do make prints. Usually, I exhibit my monotypes for Indian market, and I have small sort of limited edition monotypes I do. I think it's great.
You know, grab one? I have one in the car.
No, it's okay. In particular, I love the monotype process because it's very fluid and it's very connected to drawing and painting. So that to me is really, it helps me. You know, I do sketches and studies and things with the monotype process. It's unlike other printing processes. It doesn't have a matrix. You know, monotype is just paint on it's on a plexiglass surface, and it's run through the press under pressure with paper on it. So it's very direct in terms of printmaking. It's not like wood block printing or lino block. It's not planographic. It's very direct, very straightforward. So I love monotypes actually.
Cool.
I love the printmaking process. Less for the ability to make additions and more just for the ability to move color around and to sort of sketch and draw.
Wow. I've still got some old Jerry Barney prints around. She was a
They're
pretty good
great.
printmaker.
Well,
Yeah.
I
But she
It,
took
it,
off.
it's a good way for people to get into an artist if they can't quite afford original painting too. You know,
Right. Right.
if people are starting out collecting, or if they have maybe limited wall space, there are reasons why. I have a lot of respect for it. I think it's fun stuff, and I collect other prints too.
I think it's beautiful. David's got a
Alex Pena is a
question.
great printmaker. I was going to say that too. Alex Pena is a wonderful artist and draftsman and printmaker as well.
Oh, cool. Right on, Alex. Thanks for being here. And we got two more well, let me just say what Karita Coffee's saying. Think of you putting writing in your toolbox. You're a good speaker. Excellent. That's a serious compliment from Karita. And then David's asking about art schools teaching. Do art schools still teach that one must be strange and separate from the community in order to be an artist? That's going to be a quick answer there.
I don't know. It's been a while since I've been around art school. I guess it depends on the art school, right? Maybe.
Right. Okay, and then there's more questions coming in, but I'm going to take this time to bring Elena in to talk about the non-talk. Oh, last question. Okay, last question. How do you balance out your time between studio and family time?
I'm almost entirely committed to my family. It takes up
Beautiful.
much more time than the art. I'm a full-time family guy, especially with my son, and he has some very special needs at this time in his life because of medical conditions he has. And my whole family is centered around working with my son. And I'm really a part-time artist at this point in relation to that. So that's probably 75% of my energy going into my son and my family, and then
Good on you.
Goes into the studio.
All right, Mateo. Well, I got a lot more questions for you, but I'm going to bring Elena in and step out for a minute. We'll come back and bring some of your fan club in, and we'll just try to end it at the top of the hour. Thank you so much. You're beautiful.
Thank you.
Thanks for that, Tash. And Mateo, thank you so much for that extraordinary medicine and all the gifts of what comes through you and onto the canvas, of how it touches everyone, and your mob of fan base who are here. You know, our theme is family for this year of what we've been doing, and very blessed to have your niece intern with us, Cricket Tiger, who last month interviewed Rose B. Simpson. And so what's going to happen now, I'm going to be very quick so we can invite everyone in who may have some questions or amazing comments that Tash has already shared. So this is what's happening next month. Same channel, same time, November the 19th. We'd love to see you. Cara Romero and also Diego Romero, beautiful couple, also Mateo's brother and sister-in-law, will be with us sharing about their crafts and arts, being November, which is Native American Heritage Month. We want to thank this wonderful process of being here. If you want to be able to share Mateo Romero's wonderful evening tonight, you can at our website IndigenousWays.org. There in the video library, not only will you see Mateo Romero's interview here that you can share with others, but also over 200 presenters that we've had through this channel since April the 1st, 2020. At our website too, if you're not already on our newsletter, we'd love for you to subscribe to that. Below me, as Mateo was talking about, is social media that is flashing before us. We'd love for you to subscribe or like any of those pages that are zipping along. And Mateo, I'm going to tell you, that whole social media thing, I've been off for about a year and was on retreat and happened to pick up my social media on Saturday. Also saw that a mate who's sitting in the lounge right now is from Aussie, And I saw that because I went on social media and I thought, it's a big full-time job just being on social media. So
It is, yeah. It's its own thing, yeah.
it really is. It really is. I want to also take this time to thank our interpreters that are here, delivering ASL, making access available to all. Right now you're seeing the beautiful Raylan Skeets. We've also got Mariah Garcia with us in this moment now. Also want to thank our sponsors, the City of Arts and Cultural Department, as well as the National Endowment for the Arts, and also too for our individual donors who have made all our programs, including the Wisdom Circle, free, so it's accessible to all. The second to last thing I want to share with you, last week Indigenous Ways was very blessed to receive the Mayor's Award for Excellence in the Arts, and that was for Cultural Connect. And so there's a little image there of all those people that came in with us, came in and shared the moment with some board members, and because this is a collective thing that we share with all of you and making that possible. The last thing, if you're able to, we have our donate pages, which is through PayPal, Venmo, or a snail mail, or even on our website, if you're able to do that. And now what's going on is we're going to welcome you in the last 10 minutes to turn your screen on and ask Mateo a question if you have. While you're figuring out where your camera and your mic is, down the bottom on the left, you can certainly come in by using that. While we're waiting for you to come in, Sheldon shared a question, Mateo, which is, how do you balance out your time between studio and family time?
I don't anymore. I take almost all my time for my family. It's become, especially with my son's, medical, it's become a huge focus for everyone around me, and that's including my oldest daughter, Jopovi Romero, who's helping us right now, and my wife, Melissa Tlach, in particular, and also to an extent my younger son, River Romero. So I put overwhelmingly all the time into my son, and I get into the studio at the end, and it seems to be working. To be able to pull that off. I guess I've been painting long enough where I don't have too many questions about the process of painting in the studio. I think I'm pretty straightforward about what I'm doing in the studio, pretty focused. So I go in after the family stuff is resolved and paint at the end.
You're muted.
Thank you very much. You are you're a rock star to a lot of us IAIA alums that got to run around in the same circles back in the day. I want to thank you, Marla, for coming in. Would you like to say some words if you want to unmute and talk to Mateo for a short moment? That'd be great.
Hello.
Hey, Marla.
Hi, thanks for letting me be a part of this. It's highly unexpected. I thought I was incognito.
Good to see you.
Yeah, you too. Brilliant speech, Mateo. You are such an inspiration to me and many others. And, to see your work throughout my career and even being a student now into, my own career and following your lead has been incredible. I'm sorry I missed some of the intro of anything I was supposed to mention.
You did fine. It's good to see you. It's good to see you. It's always good to see you. You're a wonderful painter, and I'm glad to have had you as a student. And it's
Thank
just
you.
cool to see you. You look wonderful.
Thank you.
How are you? How have you been?
I'm good. I'm doing good. Working on an exhibition myself, where I'm doing a group show here in Northern California, which will be debuting October 25th at a place called Hammer Friar Gallery. And thanks to your encouragement and even your teachings as well, this summer, I think we talked in March, or maybe, yeah, we didn't get to talk in August. So yeah, I did a 2-month teaching, artist research trip in Germany, and at Bremen University, I was able to teach for 2 months to a bunch of international artists, all about Native American art and poetry. And you were mentioned, and many other inspirational artists were part of the dialogue and curriculum. So I just wanted to say your words are repeated not only in the United States, they're far beyond reach. And I'm just grateful to have been one of your students and to know you throughout so many years of my life.
The pleasure is mine. That's Carrie's for thank you.
Thank you.
Great. It's been great having you. Just having the relationship with artists like yourself over time, it's been amazing.
Thank you.
I'm very humble and grateful to be your instructor.
What a blessing it is. And for myself and many other students that were able to be in the same realm of your teaching and at IAIA. It's a brilliant school and brings a lot of great artists and people from it. And gave us all strength.
That's so beautiful. Marla, thank you so much for coming on and being here. And this is this incredible essence. In order to keep what we've got to give it away. And so for you just to be here, I know Karita Coffee's here. There's so many people in the back end, very shy, but just some of the things that you're doing is really extraordinary. And that's what it's all about. How do we elevate our whole community into the endless possibilities? So Mateo, thank you so much for your leadership there. Tash.
Yeah, I'd like to second that, and I'd love to talk to you, Marla, at another time and bring you on to our show next year sometime.
Sure.
That would be really wonderful, and an honor to support you in that way with this platform. That's what we're here for. So I'd like to pass it on to our beautiful president, Homer Hubble from the Dene Nation. Hey, Homer, thanks for being here. Would you like to say some words to Mateo?
Thank you for coming onto this platform and speaking to us. And for me, thank you for educating me. I was just really impressed by your knowledge and your lifestyle, your wisdom. And thank you for sharing that with us tonight. I think that was, your work has inspired people. And keep up the good work. And again, thank you for bringing your thoughts and your wisdom to our wisdom circle tonight. Yeah, thank you.
Yuma, thank you for having me.
Okay, Homer. And all right, well, it looks like we're just about at the top of the hour. Unless somebody has a serious, burning, quick question for Mateo, let's go ahead and call it a night. Thank you all very much for joining us. As always, we love you, Raylyn and Mariah, for the work you do for our community out there to make access happen for our deaf and hard of hearing brothers and sisters. Thank you very much. Last word from Alex Pena. Mateo is an incredible and loving person. His insights and sharing with me have helped me through my career. And thank you very much, Mateo, and we'll see you in the community.
So on that note, let's not only will we look forward to seeing you November the 19th for the beautiful Cara Romero and also Diego Romero. Let's give it up for the one and only Mateo Romero.
Let it go. Let it be. Let it roll. Let's hear your new song.